Hello and welcome to Psychological Insights. Today we're going to veer off our usual pattern. Usually we talk about emotional states. We've talked about shame. We've talked about anxiety. We've talked about obsessive compulsive behavior. But today we're talking about the coronavirus. So the question is, why? Why is Psychological Insights concentrating on the coronavirus? I'm Pat Kazakoff. You're watching Psychological Insights. Stay with me, and we're going to find out the why. So you heard my introduction. I'm talking to Dr. Robert Hamme. He's a psychologist in West Hartford Center. Why are we talking about the coronavirus?
We're talking about it because it's here, obviously, and we need to be prepared to deal with whatever is coming along. We still don't know enough about it to be able to make accurate predictions, of course, but we nonetheless need to be adequately prepared.
But why? We're on a show about psychological insights. Why particularly this particular topic on a program called Psychological Insights? That's unusual.
Well, this is a show for the community to address issues that are relevant to the world that we live in today, and what can be more salient in the world community than this right now.
But is this affecting, you're a psychologist, is this affecting your patients? Are you seeing this on a daily basis?
Well, it's fairly new, but I am talking with my patients. People are certainly interested, some people are concerned, some more than others. So everyone is talking about it, wanting to know how should we respond, trying not to become overly concerned or panicky, but to be adequately prepared nonetheless.
And so how would adequately respond, how would that demonstrate itself?
Well, I think that we need to be informed about what's going on and what we can best do to prepare for whatever might come along because of this.
So having said that, what did you think of, since we're talking about opinions and since we're talking about what's going on in the world, what did you think of President Trump's response to the coronavirus?
Well, I think that understandably, he does not want to create unnecessary panic. So I have to grant that to him, that try not to allow a kind of mass hysteria to take place. But we also have to take into consideration that he was not listening to his experts to become more prepared in informing the public and to ready our government to have adequate provisions in place to deal with the
So
potential.
what would more prepared look like from a governmental point of view? What would that look like to be more prepared?
Well, from what we're reading in the news and what we're aware of, that there may be a gross underestimate of how prevalent this virus is here in the United States at this point, because we don't have sufficient testing that's available for all the states. It's been very difficult to get adequate testing, partly because of all the red tape between the FDA and the CDC. And then we also know that when the CDC did, from what I've read, produce some tests, that they were faulty. They were not coming up with accurate results. So we're behind the eight ball. So in that very critical period, we have a contagion that is multiplying, and we'd have no idea how far where the horses are out of the barn. So Dr. Anthony Fauci today who's the head of one of these government health agencies, said, it's too late in terms of trying to contain at this point. Now it's here.
Well, so far we have in Connecticut, we have 2 confirmed cases, one in Bridgeport, I think it was a doctor, and one in Danbury. So that's certainly, there's more cases of influenza flowing around than there are of the virus at this point in Connecticut.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So that would seem that, could it be that it's a little overrated? Could it be?
Well, even again, we don't have adequate testing. And so while there may be 2 cases that have been reported, how many cases are there that we don't know about? That is yet to be determined. Again, I don't think that we should be overly anxious about these things.
So are you seeing people in your practice, are you seeing people who are overly anxious about this? Do people come in and really address this, or are they still addressing their own private issues? Or is this becoming part of their private issue?
Well, before I answer that, I just wanted to finish answering your first question. That it's I don't think you can compare the flu with the coronavirus also in terms of the degree to which it does create concerns. We don't know enough about this strain. And even though the flu is much more prevalent, again, we don't know the prevalence of coronavirus yet because we don't have adequate testing. We don't have a vaccine for it, and it won't be here for another year and a half, unlike the flu. So those are the reasons why we should be more concerned. In answer to your second question, Pat, I've been talking with all of my patients now about this, and it is so prominent in the news, of course. I've been talking with them about adequate hygiene, explaining to them what I'm doing to address it in my office, in the building where I work, and all of the potential ramifications it has for my being able to conduct my practice with my patients. And they've been very receptive and appreciative of that discussion. In talking with them about how it's affected them personally so far, now the population I work with generally is a younger population. I don't work with a higher age group.
When you
generally.
say younger, what is younger?
Well, people who are middle age or
30s,
young adult,
40s?
30s, 40s, 50s. But the population that we know is most at risk with this particular virus is people over 60, 70, 80. Mm-hmm. So they're less concerned for their own welfare than might be for older population. But they are concerned for their parents or grandparents who are much more susceptible, who have health problems, who put them at risk or in nursing homes. So there is concern about that. And then we also talk, if they have children, how are their children responding? They see it in the news. The children also see that it's affecting their schools. The schools might shut down, that there are restrictions in terms of meetings in large auditoriums and things of that nature. So how do you talk with your children? What are they saying?
How do you talk to your children? What is the right response?
It's sort of like the dialogue that parents are advised to have on any important topic, whether it's sex education, whether it's about violence in the media. You try to tailor your discussion with your children according to their level of curiosity and understanding. So if a child is very young, under 6 years old, they may not be able to cognize, all of the ramifications of this, and so if they don't bring it up, it may be best not to. But for children who are older than that, I think it's advisable for parents to ask them what their thoughts and feelings are about what's happening. What are they hearing in school from their peers and their teachers?
So you have people who come in to see you with specific problems and anxieties. And do you find that this kind of a thing, this disease, coronavirus, that's the one we're talking about today, but does it impact people with anxiety? Like, do people with anxiety become more anxious because what's going on around them, even though it doesn't affect them directly? Is there some correlationship with that?
Oh, absolutely. If you already have anxiety, this is another reason to feel anxious, of course. And we know from studies that the more you watch the news, and the news is by and large very negative, as we all know, the more distorted view you have about the problems in the world and the likelihood that it's going to affect you personally.
So what should you do? Like, what should you do to basically lessen the general anxiety? What are the tools?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That really, I think, reaches into the heart of the problem, where psychologists come in. First of all, I think that we need to be prepared that this is a reality. It's not a fantasy. It's because to some degree it's like a nightmare. It's not something we might see in a dystopian movie or novel. But it's not. It's a reality. Scientists have been warning us about this for some time, and now this is the first. We've seen MERS, we've seen SARS, but they've been contained by and large. This one is the first pandemic.
Well, it's worldwide.
That's right. So we do need to be adequately informed and prepared to know about the true ramifications. Being prepared is certainly a very helpful way to manage your anxiety. If you're not prepared, you're going to feel worse.
So how would I prepare myself? What would be some things that I would do to prepare myself?
Well, be informed, first of all.
So being informed, at the same time, there's like there's a problem with being informed, because the too informed you are, the more anxious you get, the more you read, the more upset you become.
Right. Well, I was going to talk about that, but first we're talking about preparation. You can over-prepare, you can be overly anxious, you can be overly concerned. But with regard to the first part of this is that you should be adequately prepared, because if you're not, it only, I think, heightens your anxiety. So, I tell patients who are avoiding things in life that avoidance is a way for a person with an anxiety disorder, for example. People with anxiety disorders characteristically avoid in order to be out of sight, out of mind, but it doesn't work. The more that you avoid dealing with something, the more it builds up in your subconscious that you're trying to keep at bay things that you need to address in your life. So avoidance only makes anxiety worse in the long run. That said, we can overly prepare, be overly anxious. So as we were just talking about watching the news, it's important that you, first of all, that you try not to be overly obsessed or consumed with it. Watching the news 24/7, and also being able to discriminate what are good, reliable news sources from sources that blow things out of proportion, that create mass hysteria.
So I'm hearing, like in most things, you have to have balance. That's what I'm hearing. So I'm hearing, know the news, but don't watch it 24/7.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, we don't really know. Nobody has a crystal ball. We do need to be adequately prepared, overly prepared, because we don't know the ramifications of all this. That said, we also have to keep level heads about this and not get overly concerned so that we worry ourselves sick. So worrying excessively creates a lot of unnecessary distress, and even can compromise our immune systems, making us more susceptible to the very things that we worry about in the first place.
If I'm a worrier or anxiety-ridden, how do I not worry? How do I make myself not worry? Is there some sort of technique for that?
Yes, well, that's where my role comes in, isn't it, in dealing with anxiety. So it's helpful for us to try to address if we have a susceptibility to
Perseverating.
overly estimate things, to catastrophize, to magnify problems. It's helpful to identify what those kinds of thoughts that we have that create that distortion, to help us to sort of balance our perspective.
So I get the thought in my head. I have the thought, and I'm obsessing a little bit, and I can see myself obsessing. I can see myself going back and forth to the internet all day and reading things. So now that I'm aware of that, what do I do? Do I just stop going to the computer? Is that the answer?
That is,
part of the answer?
That's one thing you can do, yes. You try to put in proportion what you're imagining so that you are not catastrophizing. You try to then, first of all, what can I do to, if I'm feeling overly anxious, what can I do to feel better prepared? What can I do to put this out of mind? So you can engage in other kinds of activities that serve as suitable distractions. Talk with friends and family. If we have to be quarantined or isolate ourselves, to make sure that we have enough to stimulate us to keep our minds occupied on other things that are entertaining and don't allow us to get sort of consumed with this. Because the virus, which is contagious, could be, even less contagious than the anxiety itself that it can produce.
Well, that's interesting that you say that. Can you say that again so people can hear it? The anxiety, that you said that the anxiety that you produce from this could be even more anxiety producing than the actual anxiety.
Right. Well, we know about the phenomenon of mass hysteria, and it's very contagious. Just as much as a physical illness, contagious disease, is something that can catch, on like wildfire throughout a population, so can hysteria. So can our imaginations get the best of us.
So the distractions, the activity, basically you're doing the same thing you are for any kind of anxiety. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, so in my clinical practice, I work with patients in helping them it's called cognitive therapy, how to check their thought processes, to become aware of how they distort, if they magnify, if they overgeneralize, to rein that in so they look at things with a more proper proportion. And then secondly, teaching them relaxation skills. So one of our Psychological Insights TV shows was on one of those methods that I use called autogenic training.
Oh yes, you mentioned that. I remember that one, autogenic training. Yes.
So it's right on my, it's with my blog, and you can read all about it and watch our interview about it. And today, there's so many meditative techniques out there. There are apps such as Mindspace and Calm. Many of them are free.
Would you recommend them?
I haven't used them myself, but I'm told from colleagues and patients, they use them and they find them very helpful. So relaxation exercises, cognitive therapy, talking with others, engaging in distracting activities, things that are enjoyable, whether
like
it's
movies or reading a book.
That's exactly right. Staying connected, all those things I think can be helpful to in not watching too much news, and making sure that you know that what news you do watch is reliable, to keep things in proper perspective.
Are there any books being written now about the coronavirus? Is there something that's coming out that people can read? So it's an expert analysis and sort of clear thinking. Is there something that's really out there that you recommend? Although probably there's hundreds of them being written right now, But there is a book I read about that's not quite yet published, but I think it's in the process. The author is Abby Gewirtz,
E-W-I-R-T-Z. And the title of the book escapes me. It's about how to talk to your children about scary things. So if you want to know how to talk with your children, that will be helpful. Something you and I were just talking about a little while ago. There is a book, I was just reading an article in the Times, an author, I don't know his name, he's from Great Britain, he's a mathematician, and he wrote a book entitled Contagion that just recently got published, not because of this coronavirus, it was just a
coincidence.
Coincidence, yeah. In helping us to make a determination about how viruses are likely to spread so that we have a better idea about what the proportions are likely to be. So those are two books I know about. Others not offhand.
So anything else that you want to tell me that is important for basically good health of people so that they don't over-dramatize and over-emphasize this in their lives, that it doesn't become something, you hear about people who they can't drive across a bridge or they can't go into high spaces.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a problem. That's a problem, and that's something that people come to you about. They have these phobias. This can become a phobia, can it not?
Yes, yeah. If we become overly concerned, naturally it can become a mass hysteria. So what can we do? We can try to see this as a world problem. I was just talking with Nil, one of our staff here, about how this is a double-edged sword. It can cause people to become much more self-centered and where's the hand sanitizer, and I want to hoard all this
Well,
stuff.
the hand sanitizer business is going up. That's something that is increasing. Everyone's out buying hand sanitizer. So that's a positive economic force for the hand sanitizer people.
Well, what I was going to say, where I was going with that is that it reminds me of an episode from a program I used to watch as a child, The Twilight Zone. And it was all about when something was happening in someone's neighborhood and it created a mass hysteria and a mentality of everybody for themselves. So how can we respond emotionally? We can see this as something that we all share. So as I was talking with the staff person here at the studio, it's a double-edged sword. It can cause a greater degree of self-centered concern and greediness, like hoarding hand sanitizer or whatever. Or we can look at it as something that we all share, that we develop a more altruistic perspective. We're in this together, so how can we all help each other? And that helpfulness, that altruistic state of mind, can help with the anxiety and give us a greater degree of sense of sharing. You're not alone. And a sense of being empowered, that we can all do something together by putting our heads together and helping each other. So that's something that we can do. Secondly, I think that it is helpful, if you are seeing a therapist, or if you're not, to consider seeing one to help you through this, to talk with someone about your anxieties and concerns and how to deal with this and help others through this. So I am talking with all of my colleagues in professional organizations. There's a lot of dialogue going on. How are we in psychology and we therapists going to deal with this with our patients? What dialogue should we be having with them? And also the technology involved. Let's say if there's a quarantine or people have to self-isolate, what is that going to do in terms of people's access to therapists? What is the government's responsibility? So recently, the government just recently made a directive to set aside a certain amount of money for health care, and that includes allowing Medicare patients. Previously, Medicare prohibited telehealth. That's when you do therapy through the internet.
Through the internet, or the telephone, or Facebook.
Not the telephone, that's still prohibited, but with through the computer, that has not been allowed for Medicare patients. Well, now they have changed that because of this healthcare crisis that allows patients to see their therapist the therapist has to use HIPAA compliant technology to do that, but now they can. And now we therapists and psychologists are talking with our patients, talking with each other, and the private insurance carriers to enable us to do that for those patients as well.
Well, I hear you ending on a very positive note, in that we could use this disease, this disease, coronavirus, we could use it to share with people, to be closer to people, to understand that this is a worldwide problem. It's not just it's just not a small local problem. And you've given us a lot of things to think about as far as use the distractions, use the activity, use the meditative processes, and do what you have to do to lessen anxiety. It doesn't matter if it's coronavirus, it doesn't matter if it's another anxiety. All these things work, but you have to put them into place, and above all, use a balanced approach. Would that be correct?
Yeah, well said there. Took the words right out of my mouth, Pat.
Thank you very much. I've been speaking to Dr. Robert Hamme, a psychologist in West Hartford, and next month we'll be coming back with a new topic. I hope it won't be a new virus. I hope it's a new topic. And thank you very much.
Thank you.